Hello and welcome to another edition of Tim Scott Uncancelled with me, Tim Scott. Whoever you are, wherever you are watching from and however you are watching, you're very welcome to another great show. So the format, as ever, is a few comments from me, followed by a guest, and then we look at some of the very interesting stories that have been in the news lately. We go out and we get the newspapers so you don't have to. And our guest this morning is Councillor David Moore, who I'll be introducing in a minute. So thanks for joining us, folks. And what a week it's been, what times we are living in. Absolutely fascinating and not always for the right reasons. So we've got quite a lot for you to get through this morning, some really interesting stories. And as ever, we try and finish with a bit of a humorous and a bit of a light-hearted one. So I'll introduce David in a minute, but just a quick heads up on what we're going to be talking about this morning. Police plan for Face ID for every town centre. Do you trust the police with your facial details when you sent off that passport photo? Do you remember giving the police the permission to use it? Then we look at what's kicking off with employment. When we look at the jobs tax, the employment rights bill, and now many pubs, hospitality, retail, frankly, I don't know how some of them are still going. Complaining, quite rightly, business rates are going up, again, not down, and employers' national insurance minimum wage going up. So there's a lot to talk about. Thirdly, do you have an electric car? If so, did you buy one because you thought, oh, this is good, I won't have to pay the congestion charge, I won't have to pay a road tax, but now they want pay per mile. How is that going to be enforced? Is your car going to have to be GPS tracked? And then we have Starmer appointing some new Labour lords. He wants 25 new Labour lords in the Labour peers. Is he just going to appoint more of his cronies and donors? Always a problem with the Lords, although of course there's some very good people there. And we finished with quite a humorous story about an inebriated raccoon. But to discuss these stories with me, I'm very pleased to introduce, again, a friend of the show, Councillor David Moore, joining us. David, great, David. You're looking very festive there with a Christmas tree behind you. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Tim. Well, over in Buckinghamshire, Christmas hasn't been cancelled, so we've got the Christmas tree.
Oh my goodness! What you mean we don't? We can actually call it Christmas.
Well, indeed, and in fact, Tim, I've actually been quite passionate about this. When we see words like season's greetings or happy holidays, it's like,
yes.
Well, how come every Christian festival has to be called something else, but every other religious festival rightly has its own name? So, we should call Christmas what it is, Christmas and the birth of Christ.
Well, yes, indeed. And as somebody once said, if you take the Christ out of Christmas, you're left with M&S. Although our fridge is usually packed with their food every Christmas, I must confess. But no, fair point.
Sorry, if I may, Tim, there's a sign outside Beaconsfield, obviously, where we're all roughly based, and it says Jesus is the reason for the season.
Thank you. Well, thank you. That's a good reminder, David. Thank you. So it's definitely Christmas in your house and not Winterval.
Yes, indeed. It's very warm, cozy.
Good. I see there's a fireplace.
Yes, I tried to get it going earlier, but it's died out a bit. But that's okay. I'll restart it later.
Yeah, just pour some extra petrol on, David. It usually works. But anyway, okay, all good stuff. Thank you. And our first story is quite an interesting one, and this is from the Telegraph recently, and a very interesting one. Police plan Face ID in every town. Here it is. Police will be given access to Britain's passport database to catch criminals under the guise of, I would suggest, facial recognition technology or software that will be deployed in every town, city and village. Labour is proposing, it says here, that police should compare photos of crime suspects from CCTV, doorbells and dash cams against facial images on government databases, including people's passports. Well, David, I renewed my passport just recently because it was coming up to its 10-year break. I don't remember giving the police permission to to use my rather sorry looking mugshot in this way. I don't know how you feel about it. I mean, if you feel there are some good points about it, please say.
I don't think this is positive at all, Tim. And the reason why is how come the law-abiding, tax-paying British citizen, who is the majority of this country, who accepts the policing by consent and the social contract, that if you are to abide by the law, you are protected by the law. But right now, the people of law-abiding people of Britain have been told to sacrifice more of their freedoms, whilst other people take advantage of our legal system, whether it be through the small boats, whether it be the two-tier policing situation, which I do think is nuanced. But what I will say is, Tim, is I went on a police ride along not long ago, and what I saw was really eye-opening. Actually, the police, have so much on their plate right now, and what I especially saw was the lack of policing capacity of actually tackling real crime, such as burglaries, such as dealing, for example, there's issues with people who are undocumented, illegal immigrants. A lot of them have been here for like 5-10 years plus under the system. Bringing in this ID will not change that, because they don't carry ID anyway. We would have to sacrifice more of our freedoms because the political system wants to survey more. It wants to push this towards a social credit style system that China has, where, like a credit score, if you say something wrong online or if you say something politically incorrect, they could basically limit your credit. So this is a slippery slope, and it is not a win.
Is that the message, David? Police are streets, not our tweets.
Exactly. And I know for a fact that with policing at the moment, with the backlogs they are facing and the capacity issues, policing online, policing tweets, policing law-abiding citizens who are having an opinion online is detracting from real crime.
Yeah, I think, is there an issue here, David, that the police are taking the easy way out, that getting out on the streets in the cold and the wet, and you've got to deploy people out and trying to tackle people, trying to arrest people who may not want to be arrested, is quite a bit more difficult than sitting in an office looking through people's social media accounts.
But what I will say is, when I witnessed the police, a lot of them were out on the beat, but the problem is there weren't enough of them, and also they had those capacity issues. It's the politicians that need to change the rules, because policing now, if a police constable, the amount of red tape they have to face when it comes to arresting, when any kind of decision they make now, they have a fear of being kind of held before a civil service style tribunal. This is the nonsense they have to put up with. Let the police be able to go back to traditional policing on the beat, policing by consent, local bobbies on the streets, and the politicians need to get out of policing and stop messing it about with PC ridiculous policies, in my view.
Broadly agree, David. Broadly agree. I'm a bit worried about where we're going with all this, live facial recognition technology. Quick word from you before we move on to the next stories. Police and crime commissioners have been abolished. One of many elections to be abolished, we're hearing. Labour don't want these mayoral elections this next year. They want them in 2 years' time. Your thoughts, just very briefly. I mean, our guy here, Thames Valley, Matthew Barber, I always quite liked him, but your very brief comment on, as a local councillor, you've obviously been out with the police on abolition of police and crime commissioners.
I think it's actually a mistake. I think Matthew Barber is a fantastic police and crime commissioner. He's invested in my ward and many other wards. For example, in Farnham Common, he helped us get new kissing gates to stop illegal quad bikers. He helped with CCTV funding as well. He's a single point of contact. When you need to contact something about any issue you have with policing and crime, he's there. What they're going to replace it with is a committee of councillors who is going to cost the taxpayer more, who are going to be on an allowance, and you're going to have no single point of contact, and it's going to give more powers to unelected officers in that police authority, whereas Matthew Barber is elected, so he's accountable. So I actually think it's a mistake, Tim.
I agree. I think police and crime commissioners, it was an experiment that wasn't really given the priority or the powers that it needed. The cost was tiny compared to the overall police budget. And I think it gave a link between the public and the police. And he was visible. he had to be elected. So I agree with you. I think it's a retrograde. I think it's an unfortunate step. But so talking of steps, we move on to our next story. And this is from the Daily Express. And we have a mugshot here of Keir Starmer. And this is looking at hospitality, looking at the retail sector, looking at hotels. And the criticism here from Kemi Badenoch at PMQs, saying first it was the jobs tax and then the employment rights bill. Now they've withdrawn business rates relief. I've got to say, David, I don't know how some of these places are still going with everything that's going on.
Small businesses has been hammered hard for the last few decades, and now this is almost like the nail in the coffin at this point. Small businesses who are already facing huge issues with NI, trying to employ people is already, the costs, overheads are already through the roof, and now once again they're being hammered once again to a considerable degree. And the losers of this budget are the strivers. The losers of this budget are those who work hard, who want to pay their taxes. And this country is full of wonderful small businesses who work hard, who graft, and being punished even more to subsidise terrible economics of giving to those who do not be productive and taking from those who work hard. And small businesses are the fabric of this country. So it's really concerning.
Yeah, I mean, at PMQs the other day, Prime Minister's Questions, a Liberal Democrat MP got up and spoke of a woman who runs a shop in her constituency. And it's so difficult is she finding it. She hasn't been able to draw any earnings for 4 months. And, of course, this is the thing when you run your own business. Everybody, you're quite rightly, your staff, your suppliers, the revenue you get paid, you pay yourself last. I worry about pubs in particular. Loads of pubs are closing. And the smoking ban, the complete smoking ban, fine, ban it in the public area of the pub, but I always felt that landlords at their discretion and with customer demand should have been able to designate a separate enclosed, clearly marked and ventilated smoking room. Some have a caravan in the car park. That is a de facto smoking room. So hotels, retail, hospitality, and of course this is, David, these are sectors in which many younger people, maybe when they're still at school or at uni, where many younger people get their first jobs, and it gets them into the habit of working.
As a small business owner, the business owner and their employees know best. When big government gets involved with business, like you said, first it was the smoking ban, then it was the rise in duty on alcohol. It gets worse and worse, and you cannot tax yourself to growth. And we're seeing, like you say, so many pubs who are struggling, also facing the cultural changes of now, like, for example, my generation, for some reason, doesn't want to go out anymore. But I wonder why. Well, because, of course, they're not taking home that much money every month either. So it's a knock-on effect. And this is what happens when government takes, but doesn't give.
Yeah, I think you're right, David. I have to say COVID, COVID has to bear some responsibility here. Okay, I know there was, the first lockdown could have been introduced a bit sooner because we weren't sure what we were exactly dealing with. But the lockdowns were prolonged and harsh. Many of the opposition parties wanted them even longer and harsher. These retail really suffered. Hospitality, pubs, hotels, shops, they were really hammered. There's no regular salary for these guys, is there? And I think also, David, cheap supermarket booze. Do you think that's a factor?
Well, to some extent, but then the supermarkets were also guilty over COVID of upping the prices by over 100%. I think the issue we have here is lockdown was socialism gone mad. It was print as much money as you want and kind of buy a bit of time and let the younger generations, who they will pay the bill for lockdown. Because at the end of the day, my generation aren't going to retire anymore because the national debt of this country is so astronomical. Plus, with the amount of money printing to keep, schemes like Eat Out to help out, you had over lockdown, and of course the immense level of borrowing, which basically makes our money worthless because of inflation. So that's another tax that affects everyone. So I think lockdown has a huge part to play in this, and we all know, if we look at, in hindsight, if you look at Sweden and other countries who didn't have a lockdown and had a herd immunity, it was actually the same impact. So we just basically poured trillions of pounds I think it was about a trillion plus pounds down the toilet.
Have you had any pub closures around your way?
Well, my favourite pub is, well, one of my favourite pubs is, well, it's the favourite. It's the White Horse Hedgley. It's a wonderful real ale
Oh
pub,
yeah,
and
yeah.
luckily, far as I understand, business is good. But there are lots of pubs where they're not freehold pubs. They're public houses,
Mm.
PHs, which traditionally would have a tenant who would run the pub, and they're really struggling. And I know that it's some other big names, even like Green King pubs, that they're struggling at the moment. I know Weatherspoons is always a popular choice. And there may be a Weatherspoons opening in Beaconsfield, I believe, which is very popular because Weatherspoons provides very cheap booze, cheap food, and it's very popular for young people. But then again, they're a bigger business. So, I fear for these small pubs, Tim.
Yeah, the small independently owned pub, David, is in trouble. I mean, Hedgley, like many villages, it used to have two pubs. There was one at the other end of the village. That's closed. The White Horse, actually, it's a great community pub. Interesting you mentioned Weatherspoons. I mean, they're a big chain. What have they got? Over 1,000 outlets. They're able to buy beer very cheaply. They buy short-dated beer, because they shift so much of it. The small independently owned pub can't do that. And the way they cook, I heard this somewhere that, for example, their food, everything is pre-cooked except eggs and sausages. So it just has to be heated up at the venue. They've got some enormous warehouse near Watford. It's quite clever, really. It's quite a clever business model. I mean, this is why they can do an all-day breakfast, with bottomless tea for about £3.90 or whatever it is, it's a great business model that they've got there. But I do worry the small independently owned shop, the small independently owned hotel, the Fawlty Towers. Hopefully it's a bit better run than Fawlty Towers was. Is not part of a big chain, and we've got these identikit high streets now. I mean, not so much here in leafy South Bucks, but around the country. You go to places where so many shops are boarded up, and those that are left are just part of a national chain. You've got these identikit high streets.
It's so true, Tim, and I'm really worried about the huge amounts of barbers and vape shops that are randomly popping up, and the amount of money laundering going on, crime that needs to be tackled. And I think we need to also support our high streets and create the demand as well, because a lot of people, it's easy for them to just mostly order on Amazon or online. That needs to change. I think with small businesses, they're always the one getting hit hard because, like you mentioned, whether it be Weatherspoons or any other big chain or company, they can take the economies of scale, they can take the regulatory burden and tax burden because they have the capacity, they have the scale. But small businesses cannot expect it to be planning ahead all the time for another politically destructive and economically destructive tax rise.
Yeah, quite right, David. Okay, we'll move on now. Our next story is to do with electric cars. A lot of people have gone out and bought electric cars. Of course, this is one reason why we're going to need a lot more electricity in future. All these data centers and AI, we're going to need a lot more electricity, and I do worry about where it's coming from. But have you got an electric car yet, David, or are you planning to get one?
That's it. Well, it's a very well timed question, Tim, because my wife Ophélia's just got a mini petrol. We just bought a mini secondhand 1.5 litre, and we did look at electric cars, and I may be looking at some new cars soon. But electric cars, what we were quite shocked was the second-hand value of them are quite low. We wondered, why is that? Well, it's because the infrastructure. It's because when you actually look at some of the prices to do like a turbo full charge on the motorway, it costs more than the fuel. So you've got issues with capacity, you've got issues with infrastructure with electric cars, but also you have issues with supply chains. The amount of lithium required to make these things, especially with some of these dodgy supply chains where they've been using African children to mine the lithium, raises a lot of concern. So I think EVs, it just shows really, we were told that EVs were going to be tax-free and hybrids were tax-free. But of course, this hybrid tax that we're seeing is just an example of anything it moves, they'll tax. So, no one's safe.
Yeah, so this is a tax. This is from the Times, and this is a tax on hybrids and also on electric cars. So it's a paper mile hybrid tax will hurt drive to hit green goals. A paper mile tax on plug-in hybrids (brackets as well as electric cars) could push motorists towards more polluting cars. Ministers have been warned, but will they listen? Plug-in hybrids, which can switch between battery power and a conventional engine, will in effect place double tax while running on petrol or diesel from 2028. This is because motorists will pay fuel duty on top of 1.5p a mile charge. It'll be 3p for electric vehicles. Just watch as that goes up at every budget. And for electric cars announced in the budget, industry experts believe it will deter buyers and more people will turn instead to a mild hybrids. And of course, you've got this thing with all the toing and froing with the date by which motor manufacturers were supposed to be producing a mandated number of cars that people were reluctant to buy. And then they were going to get penalized for every petrol and diesel car that they produced over that. I mean, that was going to be 2040. Then Boris brought it back to 2030. And then I think Labour kicked it back to 2035. I mean, it's a lot of uncertainty for the motor industry and planning ahead. And our motor industry, I mean, quite apart from the cyber attack on Jaguar Land Rover, hasn't really done the motor industry any great favours. But I wonder, David, what do you think? What's the future of electric motors in the UK?
We have to be pragmatic and realistic and understand we cannot replace every vehicle with electric. There isn't enough lithium, there isn't enough infrastructure or capacity. People can't afford the electric infrastructure required for EVs. So we have to be realistic and understand we have to have a diversification where we have some hybrids, some electric, some petrol, and keep government out of it, because this is a good example of government lecturing to people what they should buy, what they should do, and then proceed to tax them anyway. It's behavior of a charlatan. And the other crazy thing is with this is with all these targets 2030, 24, these are all these kind of Stalinist targets, 5-year plans. Government should not be setting a date to when you should considerably change your lifestyle and what you should drive. And it was a mistake putting net zero into making net zero a statutory target, a legal target, because that meant all the businesses started gearing up for that target, and now they keep moving the bloody target. Then businesses are like, okay, well, what should we produce next? So it's creating uncertainty, and that's damaging the economy and the consumer.
Yeah, I think fair play, David. I mean, I think as you say, there is a bit of a sort of a Soviet Union 5-year target for tractor production sort of element about this. Okay, so 2 stories left, and we move on to the next story. This is from The Guardian. Interesting story about Parliament itself, slightly geeky, but I think it does have a public resonance. And this is Starmer expected to appoint 25 new peers in push to rebalance the Lords. Very interesting. Who will he appoint, I wonder? Keir Starmer is putting the finishing touches to a list of dozens of new peerages. This is a job for life, of course, aimed at strengthening Labour's hands in the Lords, with Rachel Reeves, outgoing Chief of Staff, expected to be among them, obviously for doing such a fantastic job. The Prime Minister is planning to publish the list before Christmas, and a number of other former senior advisors, Labour staff, and former union leaders are expected to be on it. I bet they're all jockeying for position and desperately lobbying to get their peerage. The Guardian has been told by multiple sources, well, is it time we reformed the Lords, David, and replaced it with a elected chamber?
I disagree. I think the Lords used to be what was a very experienced, politically savvy chamber that was full of people from all backgrounds, of businesses, hereditary peers who had a sense of familial duty to this country for centuries. And now what Labour do is get rid of hereditary peers that have been there for centuries, destroying 1,000 years of constitutional history, and replace them with, like you say, some donor crony that's just going to vote Labour regardless. The whole point of the Lords is they do not vote like the Commons. And on issues like assisted dying, it is the Lords that is keeping up the fight when you had a highly partisan Commons with a so-called free vote. But we all saw how Labour voted on the assisted dying bill. And we all know the Lords are actually debating this thoroughly and saying, and raising the alarm bell and saying, look, I'm a doctor, or this person is in the church. They have considerable moral concerns about the assisted dying bill, and that is what the Lords does. It is another form, a different type of scrutiny. And I really do disagree with people who, as well as people like Farage, who's in the past wanted to turn it into a Senate. Well, we're not America. We wish to defend our old British Constitution and reverse the damages Blair did to the Lords when they took the law lords out of the Lords. They vandalised the Constitution further and made a judiciary across the road, instead of having the fusion of powers in Parliament, because Parliament is the Constitution of Britain.
Well, talking of we're not America, we now have a US-style Supreme Court as well, don't we? I mean, I think on balance, I'm probably more in favour of reforming it, making it. I would make it part elected, not fully elected, and certainly on assisted dying, or as I prefer. I think it's more honest to call it. I mean, I know everyone calls it assisted dying. I think it's more honest to call it assisted suicide. Actually, the Lords are doing a great job of really, and this is why you need the Lords. And not even I would argue for a fully elected chamber, because what you don't want is a party political chamber where maybe one party would hold a majority. Okay, interesting and great stories of the day. So we come to our last story of the day, and we always try and pick a slightly humorous or a light-hearted one. And this is a story people may have come across, the inebriated raccoon. And this is from the Daily Mirror. A raccoon, this is in America, a raccoon who ransacked an off-license and got drunk as a skunk was found sleeping it off next to the toilet. The intruder crashed through the ceiling, took down the CCTV and smashed bottles. Animal control officers took the sloshed creature to a shelter to sober up. She joked on social media, other than a hangover and poor life choices, the raccoon was unharmed and safely released back into the wild. And you can see down there, bottom left, the results. This was in the state of Virginia in America. The results of the raccoon's drunken rampage. David, is this animals imitating humans, do you think?
Yes, it reminds me of the time when I think it was a bear raided a store and ate all the honey, but also fell asleep, not because of the alcohol and the honey, of course, but the sugars, when a complete sugar crash. But no, this is a very funny story. I think it's funny, isn't it? Because in the animal kingdom, you get away with a lot, because if that was a person, they would be charged for theft and damage and vandalism, and maybe even face prison time. But this raccoon will be looked after fully.
Yes, great story, and I think there you go. There's another one drinking what looks like quite a nice bottle of wine, actually. That what is that? Is that a gerbil or a meerkat or something? Drinking. At least he's got a bit of taste, and he's drinking a nice bottle of wine. So okay, so folks, that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for watching. You can find us on YouTube, Unprecedented TV. Just go to YouTube and in the search box type in Unprecedented TV. You'll find us there. And if you can give us a cheeky subscribe, that would be even better. My thanks to the studio and to our guest, David Moore. Great to have you back on the show, David. And so that's all for this time from Tim Scott Uncancelled with me, Tim Scott. Thank you for watching.